No mai, haere mai. Welcome to the Maxim Institute podcast. My name is Jason, and I'm the Communications Manager at Maxim Institute. This is our weekly short-form podcast. These podcasts are released in tandem with our weekly column and are a chance for you to hear in depth from the column's author about some of the thinking that went into producing their final piece.
Today, we speak with Communications Manager Jason Heale about his most recent column. Well, Jason, welcome along to the podcast. It's good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm on the opposite side today, so always exciting.
Yeah, well, hopefully I'll keep you on your toes. You've got a controversial piece to bring before us today and some thoughts with that. Your column titled A Prescription for Our Defence and Other Ills, Conscription, makes for interesting reading. I can't help but think you've actually plagiarised this from the Conservatives in the UK, because didn't they suggest this? So what, were you running out of ideas for this week's column, or what is it?
Yeah, that's right. No, I think the thing that got me onto this was looking around at the world around us, right? And the first sentence is, the world is getting more dangerous. And that's my starting point. You look around, you see the Russian war in Ukraine, you see China encircling Taiwan, doing military exercises. You see,
in other words, posturing and showing their strength.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And then you see conflicts around the world that have been going on for decades that we haven't really heard about. Middle East constantly in conflict. And then you hear things like the Polish Prime Minister saying that Europe is living in the most crucial moment since the end of the Second World War, that they are in pre-war conditions, I think he said in the same speech. So that is alarming. When you hear that we're in we're in pre-war conditions in Europe, you go, well, I remember what happened in the last war in Europe that New Zealand was drawn into. And I think that in order to prepare ourselves, or at least just to recognize that there's the world is dangerous and it's getting more dangerous, that we need to prepare for that. And I think compulsory military service, I like, conscription's in the title. The draft is being used by other people who I've talked to. That's bad comms, I think. So compulsory military service or compulsory service is, or national service, I think the Conservatives in the UK called it. That's kind of what I envision as a way to prepare ourselves for that. I think the best time to prepare for war is peacetime.
Yeah.
So...
Okay, so we'll admit then that the world is a dangerous place. I don't think anyone would deny that. But we've got kilometres of sea dividing us from our nearest neighbour. You've got Australia, who's closest to us. They're an ally, they're a friend, except when they're deporting people. But that's another conversation.
That's another combo, yeah.
You've got the Pacific Islands, which admittedly do have a growing Chinese influence, and that's something to be concerned about. But we're miles away. Why should we be making these costly investments in our military when we're actually not directly affected by these conflicts?
I think that we have often seen our isolation as a defense. Like you say, we're in the bottom of the world. No one's going to touch us. Like, who's going to send their warships all the way down here just for little old us? I think we undervalue ourselves in that sense. I also think that sort of doesn't recognize the fact that we're all connected now. Think about the hacking that Tim wrote about a few weeks ago that occurred a couple of years ago. That's cyber warfare, right? That you can shut down, you can hack into a foreign nation's power grid and shut it down. So I think when people think about compulsory military service, the picture they get is, we're all going to go to boot camp, we're all going to get basic training, we're all going to go serve in the trenches, and we're all going to shoot at people and kill people that we don't know for reasons we don't know and probably don't actually care about. But I think investing in other areas of defense, so it could be research, it could be cybersecurity, it could be espionage, it could be logistics, it could be engineering, it could be any number of these things. I think investing in those is actually just as much a part of what I would call compulsory military service. Of course, you're going to go through basic training, but investing in those extra parts, because we are a lot closer. The world's connected. It's a global world now. As well as that, we're an island nation who rely on exports and imports to survive. One of our colleagues has said that I think New Zealand doesn't have enough food storage to feed ourselves for 3 months or more than 3 months. So if we got cut off from the world, like if our shipping lanes became unsafe and we didn't have anyone policing them, it would be very hard for us to survive. Economically, we export a whole bunch of stuff. We import a whole bunch of stuff just for our infrastructure and things like that, housing.
So you're suggesting then that massive global conflict then would directly affect us via trade?
Well, think about COVID. Even when we didn't have COVID in New Zealand, how delayed and how the cost of shipping went up. I think the cost of a container went up from a few $100s to like a couple of $1,000. And so it would totally economically impact us.
So we don't have the luxury then to not get involved? What about our independent foreign policy?
Yeah, our quote unquote independent foreign policy. I think another one of our colleagues put it that we're only as independent as people allow us to be, right? Because we're a small island nation. We can't really call the shots in terms of saying, oh, well, we don't like what you're doing. So you're going to have to, we'll make you do this, and otherwise, we're going to not trade with you, and we're just not big enough to call the shots. So we will get dragged into something.
What's the trend been for our military? Is it getting stronger? Is it getting weaker? How would compulsory military service strengthen that?
Yeah, the interesting thing is we have had an attrition rate recently of about 15.5%. That was just post-COVID, but across 10 years, it's about 10%. And I don't think our recruitment rate meets that because our numbers are down. 10 years ago, the Defence Force's annual report said that there were 13,930 Defence Force personnel, and that includes reserves and admin personnel as well as, full-time soldiers.
So in some ways, the piece of the puzzle this would play then is growing your reserve pool.
Yeah, it would, because, you imagine if we did this for 10 years, that's 10 generations of people or 10 cohorts of people that we could call on if we needed to defend ourselves. And I think the other thing that people think about when they hear compulsory military service or the draft or conscription is that you're going to get sent out, like you're going to get conscripted and sent overseas, and that's why we do it. But I'm thinking primarily in terms of defense and looking out for ourselves. Hedgehog diplomacy is a good way to think about it, right? That we're not going to hurt you. We're not going to, we're not going out to build a New Zealand empire, but we also are going to deter you from being around us. I think of countries like Switzerland who are have been able to remain neutral in both world wars because no one wants to invade them because they know they're going to get wrecked if they do. So that sort of thing is what I'm imagining.
Are there any models from overseas that you think have worked well and could be emulated here?
So the Swiss model is one that I think is good. The one in Singapore is another one, but the one that I found most compelling was one in Norway, where not everyone in an age group actually serves. So everyone who was born in 2002, I think, is turning 18 this year, or has turned 18. Maybe that, no, be less than that. My maths is terrible. But everyone who's turns 18 this year goes into like a ballot. And so I think only 17% of the people who turn 18 in any year serve, about 9,000 in Norway. But they are chosen because they are the best of that generation. So they apply, or they don't apply, they go and they get tested, they get psychometrically tested, they get all the written and then physical tests, and the best of the best are chosen and they serve. And it's actually harder to get in there than it is to get into some Ivy League universities. And it's not something, a lot of people think, oh, you're serving, you're wasting a couple of years of your life because what's the benefit? to you. Well, these people, it's something on their CV. They get not only basic training where they can learn to defend themselves, they learn discipline, they learn kind of these life skills, leadership, cooperation, but then they get specialized training. So they go through the basic training and then they go into like engineering,
In
data.
other words, things we pay stacks of cash for off our own. So these people are getting their needs met for them, not only physically, character-wise, but also educationally, which presumably would be an advantage for that nation's economy.
Yeah, exactly. And then as well as that, some of them will go, I never thought of the military as a viable career option, but now I've been exposed to it, I'm going to continue in the military. So not only you're building up your reserve force, but you're also building up your professional military force. And to your point about economic investment and return and development, if we do this, right, conscription, you need to outfit all these people. You need to supply them with food, with clothing, with weapons, with housing and shelter and transportation and all that. And if you can provide those locally, like you're investing right back into the local economy, then plus the educational benefits you give them and the leadership and initiative that they gain from their time in the military actually provides dividends years down the road.
All right, to wrap up, elevator pitch, we've talked about the defense aspect of things, but you also highlight the societal benefits for this kind of military service. So lay them out for us in brief. What are the societal benefits for having this kind of compulsory military service?
Yeah, so I think there's the economic benefits that we've talked about. There's the defense benefits, but I think actually one thing that we overlooked is actually the benefit of a cohesive society, a rite of passage.
Built around a common experience?
Yeah, and exposure to cultures and people and socioeconomic groups that you wouldn't necessarily interact with. You get to understand that you're coming together for a common purpose. You're serving something greater than yourself. You have this sense of duty, responsibility, of transcendence in some way that we don't have in our society. So I think it would orient people to something beyond themselves and create more involved and more passionate citizens, I think, and a more cohesive and functional society.
Well, Jason, thank you for the thinking you put into this column, and it will be interesting to see whether or not this government considers some form of national service moving ahead.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Always good to be here. The world is getting more dangerous. China recently conducted 2 days of military drills circling Taiwan. Russia continues its offensive in Kharkiv, drawing out war in Europe. And the Middle East continues to see conflict. These conflicts threaten our country either because we might be drawn into them or because they threaten our trade. The Polish Prime Minister recently warned that Europe is living in the most critical moment since the end of the Second World War. Meanwhile, our country is losing members of its defence force. The total number is 11,886, down from 13,930 10 years ago. Many of those lost serve in crucial areas. Here's an idea. Let's bring back compulsory military training. Yes, the UK Conservatives recently mooted this, possibly a reason not to do it, but please, hear me out. First and most importantly, compulsory military service can strengthen New Zealand's defence capabilities in an increasingly volatile world. It is crucial that our commitment to peace and diplomacy remain. The primary purpose of the military is to protect national sovereignty, not necessarily fight wars overseas. Mandatory service need not mean active combat involvement, but preparedness for defensive operations. Think of a homeowner who insures their home despite the low probability of disaster. It could also strengthen domestic industries. The armed forces require various supplies, and by prioritizing domestic procurement, we can support local businesses, create job opportunities, and improve the economy. One study out of the USA found that for every dollar spent on youth military service, there was an average of $3.95 in higher earnings, more output, and community-wide gains. Isn't this just a drain on our already stretched economy? It could be the opposite. Imagine large numbers of young people who are highly trained and specialized in all sorts of critical areas. In Norway, young people recognize this benefit and compete to serve. It's harder to get into the army than most universities, which means more on their CV. Also, when we feel more divided than ever, compulsory military service could foster a sense of unity. Through shared experiences and training, individuals from diverse backgrounds can develop a common bond and better understand their fellow citizens. In his 2023 Maxim Sir John Graham lecture, Professor Tom Simpson noted this of his service when he said, "The batch of young officers included 2 from Cambridge, 4 from the ranks, an aspiring poet, 2 Jamaicans, and 1 who had grown up on an Aberdeen council estate. The result of the training was powerful. It changed who we were. We were cohesive and loyal to each other and those in the wider core." Geographic isolation isn't a defense strategy. Complacency and ill-preparedness in the face of growing instability will leave our nation vulnerable. Encouraging compulsory military service would fortify our defences, foster unity, and equip a generation of citizens to contribute to New Zealand's prosperity, all while upholding our values of peace and cooperation. As the age-old Roman adage reminds us, si vis pacem para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. Thanks for listening to the Maxim Institute podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us and keep up with the rest of our research and analysis of politics and policy in New Zealand, you can sign up on the homepage of our website to get our monthly forum email and invitations to future Maxim Institute events. You can search and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. From the team at Maxim, mā te wā, goodbye for now.